Yeah.
We're not giving a specific
No, we're not.
financial advice. Hey, Rupal.
Hey, Richard.
Thank you for joining me again. Maybe the last one for a while.
Let's see.
Just going to address the camera quickly as I've been doing. Two smart buddies having a chat. Today, or now, we're going to talk about building a business.
Yep.
Maybe the nuts and bolts, and maybe also some of the softer issues as well. So let's get into that. I think we could take this in a variety of directions.
Yes, we could. Yeah.
Do you want to start us off?
Oof. Yeah, I guess, well, it's something that we sort of talked about before, off camera was regardless of where you are at in your business, it's important to treat your business as a business.
Yeah.
And it's infinitely easier to start doing that from the beginning before you've got this huge, portfolio or whatever it is that you're working towards, and having to go back and retroactively sort of businessize it. So yeah, I would say just, from as soon as you possibly can, start treating your business as a business.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And I think, there's a few things that means, isn't it? So,
yeah, quite a lot.
Maybe you need to incorporate, for example, to get some advice as well. That's the right thing to do.
Yep.
We're not giving a specific financial advice, tax advice, or
Exactly.
any kind of advice. We're just talking about our experiences.
Yep.
But, some of the things that, maybe could be good to get under wraps. So, for example, I've recently taken on a bookkeeper.
Oh, okay.
I was doing. I'm financially trained, accountancy trained.
I forget that. Yeah.
I was quite capable of doing that.
I was gonna say you are qualified actually to give some advice.
Well, to an extent.
Yeah.
But the point is this: I was probably hanging on to it too long. That's my point. So because I could, doesn't mean I should.
Yep.
And so that was a job probably I should have just given up a while ago. And I've got a bookkeeper now, and I'm not really paying so much money for that service.
Yep.
And you can get services like that from actually fairly low cost locations now.
Yeah.
Using. So let's talk about some of the way you can find it. So I don't know about you, but I look on People Per Hour.
People per hour, yeah.
Or there's Fiverr.
Fiverr is amazing.
There's places like that. There's Upwork.
Yeah, there are lots of places.
You can find contractors who can work in your business. So you don't have to have a full-time person.
No, yeah. You don't need to start sort of adding to payroll, you
Absolutely.
just,
So, that's one tip is treating it like a business, and specifically, what should you be doing as opposed to what could you do?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And I think one of the things that has really helped us in our business make it a proper business is from the very beginning, when it was literally just one property and me and my husband doing everything, was actually doing things as sort of boring and unsexy as having AGM, so annual general meetings, where every January we would sit down together and have a board meeting, and the board was just the two of us. It still is. But this was a habit we started from the beginning because we wanted to treat our business as a business. So those board meetings would cover our strategy, would cover our sort of allocation of resources, would cover the division of labor, all of the things that we were doing in our business. We had a plan, we had targets, we had goals, and then we reviewed them. So we would have a January AGM and then a mid-year review to see how we were measuring up against the various plans and targets that we had set up for ourselves, because that is how businesses run. You don't know where how do you know if you've gotten there unless you've got a target and a very clear plan? And it doesn't mean you sort of blindly stick to it, but it gives you a roadmap to follow, and then objective measures to make sure that you're getting there.
Well, that sounds very grown up.
As well.
And of course, you're a husband and wife team.
Yes.
So, but were you doing this around the kitchen table sort of thing, or did you kind of do something
Initially, it was the kitchen table.
Right.
Though, if you are anything like me, working from home comes with a bit of you have to be very disciplined to not sort of feel the lure of the kettle or of the washing machine or whatever it is for you, chores that need to get done. And so we started doing them. Actually, our very, very first one was at an airport because we were flying and got delayed. And so we're like, well, instead of
AGM.
Why not? It's about the right time of year, be productive with our time, etc. But no, then a kitchen table. And then what we've realized is actually we need to go somewhere separate without distraction, without interruption. So now we go to just a local hotel that's got a nice lounge, decent food, whatever it is. So you have no excuse to break up the flow of the conversation and of the meeting's agenda. We set an agenda as well beforehand. And that way you just make a day of it like you would in any other corporate AGM.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important to have some formality.
Yeah.
Definitely. I know it sounds boring.
Yeah.
Again, we've talked about this a number of times on some of our interviews and some of our conversations.
Yeah.
But I think if you set time in your diary.
Yep.
So, for example, you talk about an AGM, annual general meeting.
Yep.
So then you have a review, midpoint review. So every year you have an AGM, I guess. Yeah. And then you have a midpoint, roughly every 6 months.
Yep.
A review. That makes a lot of sense to me. When I was working more alone, I have a date with myself.
Yeah, exactly.
In my diary.
Yeah.
And when I was working with other people, I actually set more like monthly review meetings as well, and even a weekly catch up.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
The idea of these milestone reviews, diarising them, maybe changing the environment a little bit.
Definitely.
So you can do that. And as you say, treat it like a grown-up business.
Definitely.
So I think that's good to do that. One of the things on the sort of softer side that was coming into my mind when you were talking is I asked you if you do it around the kitchen table. So someone I was talking to recently is working from home. Yep. And we were talking during the summer. So you know what that means when you've got a young family. The kids were at home. Yep. And he was sort of saying, I can't seem to get much done. Yeah. We've got the family around, and that's great. Yeah. Obviously to have the family around. Yeah. But from a business point of view, there was a big distraction. Yeah. So we talked about the idea of it maybe just 1 or maybe 2 days a week. Yeah. Going to like I don't want to promote any particular brand,
but a cafe or a restaurant.
Office, he actually picked like a serviced office. Great. And rather than a cafe, we're in a sort of a more cafe environment right now, which is really nice, by the way. Yep. But just to get out. Yes. And then focus. Yes. Because I think, in fact, I can probably take this in a number of different directions. But if you focus, you can be much more productive. Oh God, yes. And I think one of my favorite quotes is the task expands to fill the time allotted. So if you give yourself a week to do something, you'll take a week. If you give yourself 4 hours, you'll take 4 hours. And having that focused time without the distraction, without the noise, both sort of mental noise as well as actual noise, it makes all the difference in the world. I was actually just speaking to a mentee yesterday and I was having this exact same conversation, and she was saying that sometimes she gets her best work done in the car or at IKEA. In the restaurant at IKEA. You choose your location, it doesn't matter, but it has to be a protected space away from the distractions of home life or other things where you can just focus on your business for a specific amount of time. Yeah, I think so. This idea of focus. So for example, there's lots of things we could probably talk about with time management. One particular one that I find is that I actually did track every single action I did on one particular day. Yeah. And I counted 49 actions, excluding brushing my teeth. And, so I think it was 49. I'm absolutely blown away with how many individual tasks I did. Yeah. But what I realized is what was really important to me was only a small number of things. Yep. And so I actually have what I call a 3 to 5 list. Oh, okay. And I discovered literally for the important stuff for me, I could only achieve between 3 and 5 items per day. I like that. That was important to me. So that's what I did. So I had then, what are my 3 to 5 things that I must do for me today in the business? Yeah. And I thought, that's my priority, that's what I get done. That's fantastic. 49, but how many of my 3 to 5 am I getting done? So it's focusing on what's really important, because it can just drift. Well, and that sort of gets on to something else that I think is really important at every stage, is being very, very aware consciously of the high value stuff versus the low value stuff that takes up our time and our energy and our effort, because not all tasks are created equal. Brushing your teeth is a benefits and results as, having a meeting with a contractor, and so you have to be... It's a good idea to brush the teeth. Yes, of course. Yeah, at least twice a day, obviously. Good hygiene is equally important and valuable, but as far as sort of looking at your business and where you should focus your time and effort and energy, most of it really should be focused on the high value stuff. Now look, in the beginning, can you do all of the high value stuff? No, because somebody's got to, create the AST, somebody's got to do the viewing, somebody's got to do the staging the apartments or houses, whatever. You've got to do a lot of the low value stuff yourself. But as you grow and as you have can financially justify taking on expenses or delegating to somebody else, then it's key to make sure that you're delegating as much as possible of the low value stuff and keeping on for yourself as much of the high value stuff. And that will, again, you said about this in a different recording about fix and flex at different stages. As you grow, what is high value and low value will change, and sometimes some of the low value stuff will just naturally be eliminated because you don't need to do it anymore, or it doesn't matter for your business anymore, and that's fine. But it's always being very conscious of how you are investing your time. Yeah, I agree. And I think in terms of high value versus low value, I think as a principle, probably we get it, we understand what we mean, but not everybody really gets it and understands it. So what I mean by that, so I had an exercise with somebody recently, and I said, track your time in, let's say, project management, in that particular area. What are you doing? How much time are you spending? Then work out your equivalent hourly rate. And then you'll be able to find out what is high value, what is low value. What should you be doing? What should you get some other person to do?
Agreed.
Of course, in the adage, so if you know what your hourly rate should be, let's say it's £50 an hour, just to pick a number, 25, 50, 100, whatever. You know what it should be, and you focus on that. And if you can then bring in someone and pay them, say, £10 or £20 an hour, or dollars or whatever, it's it makes much more sense to give that task away. But people are very reluctant to do that, aren't they?
And it's funny because, we do that when we're employed by other people. We know what our hourly rate is when someone's paying us, but to come up with it for ourselves somehow feels like you're sort of tainting the purity of your business. There's a financial reality to everything we do, and money is important to talk about and to feel comfortable talking about, and also having a quantifiable value on your business time. You're not going to necessarily say, oh, well, spending time with my kids isn't bringing in money, so I'm not going to do it. No, of course not. We're not saying to go extreme and be crazy, but when you're working in your business, it's important to know the tasks that you are doing are worth your time. And you can only know that by valuing it, by putting an actual figure on it.
And what the thing is, you've obviously got a partner, literally, in your business. So when I started out, I didn't. And so one of the things I think a lot of people start as solopreneurs. And then we progress maybe into a bigger business, got people around us, even as a couple. One of the things that doesn't really get spoken about too much is, in fact, there's a song that comes into my mind, and it's by Seal.
Oh no!
And
We're Never Gonna Survive.
But the line was, it's the loneliness that's the killer. What are your thoughts on being a solopreneur, being alone, in business?
I can say definitively and unqualifiedly that starting our business and becoming a parent were two of the most lonely, isolating experiences of my life. They didn't stay that way, but for lots of similar reasons and some very different reasons, it feels like a very, very lonely time. And in some ways they're similar because you are sort of birthing something new. Sometimes it's a business, sometimes it's a human being. But what has been hugely powerful and instrumental to me to keep the motivation to not feel so alone and isolated is to either create a community for yourself or tap into a community that existed. So, becoming a parent, having, especially in those first 6 months, the NCT community was a huge lifesaver. It took a lot of the anxiety and the feelings of loneliness away. Similarly, in a business, there are so many either networking groups or incubators or hub spaces, co-working spaces, whatever it is, that you can just naturally plug into. And some of it will be, trial and error, see what works for you and what doesn't, because they'll have different cultures. But if you don't have anything pre-existing, then create it for yourself. The best thing that I have done for my business and my sanity is creating those communities for myself. One was literally just a WhatsApp group with two friends who were also business founders and who we just shared a lot of values and interests and other things. And we just text each other. There's no sort of rules or process. It's just like, hey, this is something really I'm struggling with. What do you guys think? Or what's some advice you've got? And they've literally, just by being friends who get what I'm doing and what we're building, have been able to give some really valuable advice that takes the loneliness away. Similarly, Entreprenora community that I've created is to serve a similar itch of to help other women founders who are feeling lonely and want to be plugged into women who are founders, who are understand what it's like to start a business and can help with both practical and also sort of moral support.
There's some really good stuff there. Actually, I can't add to that, because there's so much good content that you should share there. I think the other thing, in terms of tips in terms of running a business, is just to recognise that you can't be all things to all people,
and nor should you be.
No, and so I think you've probably done things like wealth dynamics or talent dynamics, profiling. Me too. So in these profiles, it doesn't matter which ones you use. You usually find that you're strong in maybe one or two areas, and then there's some blind spots that you maybe have. And so I guess one of the things that I've really learned to do is sort of double down, as you say, on the strengths, and then they call it wingmen or wingmen is the term.
Wing people.
Around you who can perhaps, plug those gaps where you're not so strong. So that's something I really zoned in on, because a lot of people say work on your weaknesses. But I think if you double down and focus on your strengths, and you kind of go with the flow, and then you can bring people alongside who are good and enjoy all that stuff that you don't enjoy.
And that's one of the things that I think is so hard as just human beings, we're taught from a very young age to work on your weaknesses, to always practice so you can get better at stuff you're not good at. And obviously, some of that is true and very, very important. But at this point in your life, when you've reached whatever age we've reached, you are sort of who you are, and you know intuitively what you're good at and what takes a bit more effort. It's not necessarily a weakness, it's just it takes more effort, or it's not sort of your happy place or your flow. And I think, as you said, there's so much more leverage and so much more power in really doubling down and investing in what you're amazing at, and just delegating the rest, or finding other people to do the stuff that are your blind spots, because they actually enjoy it. It's not like you're taking all of the things that you hate and somebody else hates it and they just have to sort of do it. Like, there are people who love bookkeeping. I don't like bookkeeping. There are people who love it. And like, when we found our bookkeeper, she was like, oh, give it all to me. I love cleaning up the mess. And I was like, okay, here's a great big mess, Yeah, but that's the thing. We sort of think that everybody's like us. And so things we love and hate, other people will love and hate, but that's not true. Through profiling, whatever you want to use, you can find people who love to do the things you don't like to do, and then everybody's happy. So it just sort of makes sense for lots of reasons.
Yeah, and there's so much good stuff we've spoken about there. I think we've probably been given a cue in terms of timing recently. I don't know if you've got any sort of parting comments or top tips in this sort of area at all. I'm throwing that on you, so you don't actually have to. And I'm thinking desperately myself what I might want to add to that. But I don't know if you've got any, because you're probably a quicker thinker than me, Rupal.
Well, I think the key really is to just embrace the process. There are so many times when it's going to feel lonely, it's going to feel frustrating, it's going to feel ecstatic and really, really exciting. You're going to take over the world. And just to know that these highs and lows are normal. Right. It's not that you're a freak, it's not that you're doing anything overly right or overly wrong. Genuinely, starting a business, whether it's in property or anything else, follows a very almost predictable pattern. And it's, again, by tapping into a community of people who are in it as well, that you realize that it's not just you, know, that other people are in it, and they can help give you that perspective. So my main thing, again, sort of it gets back to something we talked about in another video, is be very conscious of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. Make sure that they are people who understand you, who share your values, who are going to push you forward, to push you higher, and help you be the best version of yourself, both in life and in business, as you possibly can.
Well, one of my favorite people, I don't watch a lot of reality TV, but one of my favorite people is a guy called Marcus Lemonis. I don't know if you know this. You don't know him? He's American. Well, of course, you know all Americans, don't you?
Americans,
yeah. But Marcus Lemonis, and he basically, I think the program is titled differently in different places, but I think it's called The Prophet. Not The Prophet, but The Prophet.
Yeah.
And he says, trust the process, as you would say. Yeah. And when you said that, it really reminded me. And in fact, I've adopted that phrase when I talk to my apprentices. I've got some apprentices who I work with. And we start on day 1, we go to day 100. And you don't know what you're going to be like in day 100. So you have to go through this process. So trust the process, same with business. So I've stolen your line as well. But I guess the thing is to treat it like a grown-up business. So, have formal systems and processes. Delegate, allocate time, have a strategy that's written down somewhere, focus on your strengths, bring in people that, and have enough profit to be able to pay for these things as well.
Agreed. And I would say, I always like with the stuff that I do, whether it's mentoring, coaches, whatever, is to make sure that there's always an element of a reality check and a practical aspect to what we talk about. Because again, sort of starting a business, being an entrepreneur, it sounds very lofty and exciting and sexy, but there's a real life practicality. You have to pay the bills. You have to eat. You have to have some shelter and to be able to pay some rent. And so it's really, really important that you don't overload your business. You are taking care of the practicalities at the same time that you're taking care of the big picture and the vision.
Well, that's amazing. I don't think we should add any more to that on this particular occasion, but to be honest with you, Rupal, it's been great chatting to you today.
Much fun, Richard. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure.
We're experimenting. I'm looking at the camera here, and just if you like what you've seen today, 2 smart buddies just having a chat. If you like it, leave a comment in the comments box, whether it's whoever's channel it is you're watching it. Yeah. And is there anything you want to hear from us? Maybe, because we had a few ideas about what we share. Yeah. Maybe our audience might have other things that they'd like us to share. Would you like us to do it again? Would you like to do it again?
I would love it.
You're on camera, so you're going to say that, are you? But maybe we should close for now and go and get something to eat and drink and relax a bit. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, it's 2 smart buddies. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys. It's not just a prop.
Yeah, exactly.
After I did this webinar, I was literally, my throat was so dry. Jeez, it was just an hour and a half. All right, let's do it.
Voiceover stuff.